Okay, folks, I have referred to this in a couple of my other. I live in a hoarder's house. A couple of my other reviews. The Straight Story. This is David Lynch's only G-rated film. So, this is an interesting story, and I'm going to tell it again. I had picked up this ex-Hollywood video rental copy months ago, and my parents were visiting around New Year's, and I said, let's watch this film. I had seen this picture in theaters with my grandparents as a kid at the AMC theater at the former Block of Orange in the city of Orange, California. This movie came out in 1999, and it has an hour and 52-minute runtime. So my grandmother's maiden name, my maternal grandmother, her maiden name is Straight, and she grew up in a little town in Iowa called Emerson, population 400 or so, and it is in the southwest corner of Iowa, about 40 miles east over the border from Omaha. So, The Straight Story, it is a true story of a guy named Alvin Straight that in 1994 rode 260 miles from his home in Lawrence, Iowa to Mount Zion, Wisconsin to visit his dying brother, Lyle. This is my grandmother's cousin. I don't know how far out, but I only remember going to the movie theaters once with my grandparents, and it was to see this movie. And I remember they did not like it. They did not like how Iowa people were portrayed. However, based off of my research, it is a more real-to-life portrayal. This is probably the most un-Lynch-like film that I have watched in recent memory. This movie was a box office failure. It cost $10 million to make, and it was shot on location in chronological order on the actual route of the Alvin Straight character riding his 1966 John Deere 110 lawn tractor across Iowa to Wisconsin. David Lynch said it was the most experimental film that he made, but it didn't make up for the fact that it was a darling with critics. They loved it, but audiences did not flock to see this film. It went on to gross $6.2 million at the box office. And I can remember vividly as a child seeing it in a huge movie theater. Aside from me, my mom, my grandparents, and my brother, there was two other people in this movie that went out to see it, which is a shame, really. It's a special interest movie. It's got amazing acting. Richard Farnsworth was cast and reluctantly took the role despite him dying from metastatic prostate cancer that would go on to spread throughout his bones. So in the movie, you see him using double canes and struggling to get around. That was true because he was dying of prostate cancer. His daughter Rose was cast by Sissy Spacek. Amazing job. Alvin's brother Lyle, played by frequent David Lynch collaborator Harry Dean Stanton. Great character actor. Rest in peace, Harry. Anyway, it's got moments of Lynch that I see, and I've talked about this in other tropes of Lynch films that I have watched. He likes fire. You see the fire, the close shots of the fire as he's making his campfire, as he's going on his cross the state journey. Focal points of a thunderstorm. We know that Lynch loves to show electricity in his films. And I think one of the most Lynch scenes is, two of the most Lynch scenes are the opening scene where you see a heavier set woman just sitting in a lawn chair sunning herself. To me, that gave very Lynch vibes. And then the other scene is he does a close-up shot of the grain elevators, and Lynch was fascinated by industry and industrial sounds, and you see that in a lot of his other films, like Twin Peaks, for example, the television show, the sawmills and all that, and all the machinery. So he kind of has these focal points. It's, like I said, it's a G-rated movie. It wasn't originally a Disney film. They picked it up, I think, after the Cannes Film Festival for distribution rights. Frequent collaborator, great soundtrack, Angelo Badalamenti, which was his frequent collaborator since Blue Velvet, so the soundtrack is awesome. The script was brought to him by his other frequent collaborator, Mary Sweeney, and he fell in love with it. Okay, let's get into the meat of the movie. I think this movie is near and dear to my heart because I remember that this was one of the few VHS tapes that my grandparents owned, and I remember seeing it in theaters. It is my distant relative, winner for Best Actor Richard Farnsworth at the New York Film Critics Circle. Sadly, he died after this film's release, took his own life because he was suffering from terminal cancer. There's one of the most pivotal scenes, and there's a lot of pivotal emotional scenes in this movie, and this is ultimately reflected in my rating. Just amazing acting. Obviously, we love Richard Farnsworth because we grew up watching Anne of Green Gables, which I've also reviewed here on the channel. This is a 5 out of 5 double VHS made for TV film. But this movie is also going to be a 5 out of 5. It is excellently cast, beautiful countryside, beautiful soundtrack. There's some real poignant scenes when he meets up with that runaway pregnant girl at the campfire, and he's recounting the sad story of his daughter and her losing her children because she has some mental disabilities. It's a tearjerker. And my favorite, most poignant scene in this film is when he stops into a local bar on his cross-country trip when there's another World War II vet in there, and they're just sharing the war stories about the hardships of going through World War II in Europe. It's tough. And even the very last scene where he finally, spoiler alert, makes it to his brother Lyle's house, and just the raw emotion. Harry Dean Stanton was an amazing actor. It's just such a poignant film. So it just felt, it's not the type of movie that he would have normally done. Very tame. There's no profanity. I don't see how this movie didn't capture more attention. Although people marketed it as a Disney film and it's G rating, this movie's not going to capture a child's attention. But I can remember seeing it as a 12-year-old with my grandparents and my mom and my brother, and the soundtrack and everything always stuck in my mind. And I ended up having to rent a library DVD copy of this movie because for as long as I've had this, I finally went to play it. The tape was damaged and it wouldn't play. So I have this just as a display piece. But check out The Straight Story. It is a masterpiece of the late 90s, and I love true-to-life stories. I think that's one of my favorite things about the CBS Sunday Morning News show is they show special interest stuff like this. And I miss local newspapers because they would highlight real-life stories like this. I wish more movies were made like this. Kind of like a Hallmark vibe, but, a master like Lynch. It's just great cinematography, great aerial shots overall. And critics average Rotten Tomatoes 95%, very high. Even the audience with over 25,000 members reporting in, 91%, and a very high score of 8 out of 10 for IMDb, it's quite rare. Disappointing that it didn't do more at the box office, but I understand. It kind of is more of like an art house film. That's pretty much all I have to say about it. The back of the note, Chicago Tribune says it's the sweetest and most compassionate movie that Lynch ever made, and that is for certain. As we have dug into his catalog, there's some rough stuff out there. So he said it was his most experimental film. It was quite unusual to see this movie directed by Lynch, but there are those glimpses of the typical Lynch style in it, and I do like that. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.